Hello, viewers, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Social Research. I have a guest today, and Mr. Lagunathan Govender, and he is a senior lecturer at School of Social Work, Lund University. But today we are going to talk about his PhD work that is very interesting, and it says Crumbs from the Rich Man's Table, Municipal Labor Market Policies and Recognition of Welfare Recipients in Sweden. So precisely, it would be a topic for today's discussion with Lagunathan, recognition of welfare recipients in labor market policies in Sweden. And we will begin with a brief introduction from you, Lagunathan. Can you please tell us something about you?
Yes, sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Azeb. So, as you said, my name is Lagunathan Govender, and I'm a senior lecturer, researcher at the School of Social Work, Lund University, and I have a background in social work. So I did my bachelor's in social work in Sweden and my master's as well, and then also my PhD studies. So yeah, last year, to 2023, I completed my doctorate with this study about, like you said, labor market policies, poverty, unemployment in Sweden, and yeah, and it's really about the government's role in supporting poor people and unemployed people in Sweden.
Perfect. Okay, so that's something I am interested in to know, and I think it would be a great deal of knowledge of several people, students, young researchers who will watch this YouTube video later. So how do you, in your research, how do you see, in fact, first you can tell us what is the meaning of this recognition of poor and unemployed people? How do you see the difference between this recognition in Swedish context, and maybe you can, if we can extend it to a global perspective?
Yeah. So there's been quite a bit written about recognition in social sciences. So there's a discussion about providing a level of dignity for people. So there's a particular social philosopher, German social philosopher, whose name is Axel Honneth, and he has written about this concept of recognition. So I've been using his concept and his theory, and been using it in my work. So to say something about what it's about, I mean, and recognition is one way of approaching questions of social inclusion, dignity, and well-being. So the basic idea is that human beings have a fundamental need to be recognized by one another. We need to be provided with a certain level of respect, acceptance, and acknowledgement from people in society, and also by society itself. Yeah, so that's like the basic idea. And then Axel Honneth discusses this like historically, how people have come to expect to be recognized in different ways. So yeah, recognition is part of a broader global discussion, and I'm bringing it into a Swedish context, into Swedish society in my work.
Okay, great. So recognition of poor people. Now, what do you think that? Well, I mean, I know that in Swedish context, this concept of poverty or being poor or being unemployed might be very different from the other countries who are not a welfare state. And particularly, for example, with reference to dignity, it itself is a very subjective term. I mean, so if you include dignity in the concept of recognition of poor people, what is the significance of this recognition when you choose this definition or meaning of recognition into welfare policies? So what is its significance in welfare policies?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one way of looking at it is that in Sweden, the majority or a lot of people are employed in the labor market and active, have jobs. So the population, or the part of the population which does not have jobs and has a lower level of income or a lower standard of living, in comparison to the majority, ends up having quite low status, at least low status and low dignity in comparison with the working population. So there's something relative here. So I think that, like you said, I mean, Sweden is a rich country, and poverty here means something else from poor countries. Yeah, at least there's a relative discussion about how people who have less than other people in terms of income or financial security, so that affects the people's sense of dignity, the poor people's sense of dignity. But then again, you also have there is also what we call like an absolute poverty in Sweden, where people actually don't have enough, don't have the means to provide for their own basic needs, to have adequate food or housing and stuff like that. So yeah.
And then what do you think that who is responsible for this recognition? I mean, who are the actors who are supposed to do this recognition?
I think the way I look at it, and much of my fellow researchers look at it, is that since we have a welfare state and a welfare system, that means that in theory, the idea is that the welfare, or that the state and the government should provide for people who don't manage on their own, who don't manage like to find jobs or income security. So I, in my research, I'm to a large extent, I'm looking at, does the government live up to its promise and its own sort of idea of supporting people in need? So I think from where I'm coming from and my research approach, I look at it much as a government problem, that the government cannot or perhaps should not claim to provide, say, employment services for unemployed people, and claim that these services adequately assist people back into the labor market, if those services don't actually provide adequate services, if they are not adequate and do not help people to get jobs as the promise, or as it sounds like in rhetoric and in theory, so to speak.
Good. There's a question about this quotation, crumbs from the rich man's table. And I want you to please elaborate for me. I mean, what does it mean? Why do you write this crispy quotation, crumbs from the rich man's table?
Yeah. So first, I saw you flashing the book. I also have a copy here. So I could just show it. Oh, it's not very visible, actually. Is it more visible for you? Ah, okay, here, like this. If I hold it in front of myself like this, then you can see it. Just to get a visual of what the book looks like. So Crumbs on the Rich Man's Table. So as I was approaching the final stages of my research, and I was thinking a lot about how the main conclusions of my study, and the main conclusion is really that people who are long-term unemployed in Sweden, who have financial difficulties, and turn to the government for support in terms of finding jobs, and also being supported financially, getting financial benefits. In this case, what we call social assistance in Sweden, which is a welfare benefit. And I found that to a large extent, what I call welfare recipients, the people who are receiving or taking part in these services, the labor market policies and the benefits, that they were provided with a limited form of support. That what these services and policies actually amount to in practice was a sort of partial or a limited form of recognition, you could say, a form of inclusion in society, limited dignity. They were provided with certain benefits, certain help and support in terms of coming back into the labor market and finding a way into society and getting a decent standard of living. But at the same time, many of these people that I interviewed and did surveys with, they were also speaking about experiences of poverty, of not getting regular employment or not getting permanent employment, and still finding, that they were marginalized or that they did not have enough income, and that they also, many of them spoke about having a feeling shame and feeling like a lack of dignity and feeling like we are not actually part of society and we are not seen as decent citizens. For example, I mean, a lot of people who are unemployed do experience a sense of shame because they feel that people in the surroundings, people that they know in the networks, question them and look down upon them for not having jobs. And we also see in like in media and in politics that there's a general public attitude which is negative towards people in poverty and unemployment, that they actually look down upon, basically. So when I looked at this situation of them getting sort of certain help, but not getting enough help to become full citizens or full members of society, I should say, then to try and sort of capture that in a simple way, in a metaphorical, figurative way, that's when I started looking for some way to frame it. And then I thought of this expression with this expression, crumbs on the rich man's table. I thought it was a way to in simple terms and in a sort of colloquial way, capture the basic idea that I'm saying, that the poorest, some of the poorest in Sweden are provided with certain help, certain support, but it's still also limited.
Yes, but it is an interesting, very, what I said, a crispy quotation just on the title of your thesis. One thing that I was just thinking about when I was reading something from your thesis, when you say the recognition of poor people or unemployed people, uh, what do you think about the quality of life? For example, somebody is doing a job or having a job, but his income or her income is not enough that her or his children can attend to the social clubs and sports club because they cost a money.
Mm.
So then he is not able to give a quality of life to his children or her children. So do
Mm.
you think that they should be recognized in this system, or how do you recognize them, in poor people, or how?
Yes, I mean, and that's one of the main, sorry, the main concerns, that a lot of people who are unemployed and who rely on these benefits, they live a family life, they have children like many others, and they also speak about how the kids and the children end up suffering, and how the children also, in different ways are not fully included, cannot sort of access leisure activities like you mentioned and things like that. So these families are in general also like affected in a way that it also impacts negatively on the children and the children's, I mean, like you said, living standard, but also future possibilities. Because yeah, you might not be able to live in a residential area you might prefer, or other choices you might not be able to make, which could improve your chances of um, yeah, of striving for a decent living standard in the future.
Yeah, and I remember that in one of the meeting that I recalled, you also talk about a socioeconomic ladder. Uh, that may be used as a kind of metaphorically, that how people are placed on different steps of ladder and how they can be moved up.
Yeah.
How do you? I mean, I know that we have talked about it earlier in our personal meeting, but for
Mm.
the viewers, how do you see this socioeconomic ladder, and how do you place this recognition on that ladder?
I mean, we are basically talking about injustices or inequity. That some people in our society have more and other people have less. So one way of capturing that idea is to talk about a ladder, like a social ladder. And what what is special or distinct about this recognition theory is that it does not stop at looking at your or like your income level or whether you have a job or not. It looks at those issues as part of a bigger question of morality. So what does it mean to have a certain level of income and a job? And I'll be talking about like low status, like a lot of poor people have experienced having low status. So that also relates to this issue of the moral standing or of a person. Is a person regarded as a decent person or not? So that's also one thing I've been looking at when I've been thinking about how unemployed poor people in Sweden, when they come into these programs, employment services and receive welfare benefits, they are not by getting some help, they are not left in a complete, completely, I don't know, terrible poverty, absolute, they're not destitute. They get certain help and they manage to stay afloat, you could say. So in that way, they sort of, some might sort of be kept on a certain rung on the ladder. And over time, some might even go from having welfare benefits to getting subsidized employment. So which is an improvement for many, because then they get like some sort of a salary which is regular, and they might have a contract for 1 year saying they have a subsidized employment. So then what happens is they sort of step up on the ladder. They step up a notch or so, and they get a higher income. And then often many of them will say that over time they want to get an even better job. Say they want a regular job, and they'll want a higher salary so they better can provide for themselves and their families. And also, of course, then people also have a higher sense of status and dignity and recognition. So people in my study seem to want to strive up on the social ladder, like I suppose in most cases you'll find in society, in the Swedish society and elsewhere, that people strive to move up. I mean, other people might talk about careers. So that also links to this, my expression, or not my expression, but my title, Crumbs on the Rich Man's Table, that people in my study, they accessed certain benefits, certain financial resources and certain status, but still lacked a lot. I wanted to continue moving up this social ladder. Yeah.
Yeah, good. And now I have another question that might be a little bit of out of scope of your thesis, but somehow it is related, because you talked about the people who are unemployed not by choice and they want to move up in the ladder. Am I
Mm.
correct?
Mm.
Exactly. Okay. But there might be some people, or at least I think that there are, that who sometimes choose to be unemployed
Mm.
for certain time period, and they want to live on the unemployment benefits.
Mm.
Maybe it's just their leisure time or recreation or something.
Mm.
Do you think that if somebody is not doing anything for for 6 months or for a whole year, just to stay at home or just to have a recreation trip or something, how do you see this type of unemployment? I know it's not directly related to your thesis, but just your take on it. How do
Mm.
you this type of unemployment? And if
Uh,
it is something that can add pressure to social funds.
mhm. Okay, well, one thing I would say is I think that in media, it's common to talk about how unemployed people do it by choice, and the people who live on benefits also do that by choice. That they might not be have the motivation, they might not be keen on actually working and contributing to society. So there is this very old idea in society which stigmatizes unemployed and poor people, and sort of says that if they are poor, it's their responsibility. They have not done enough to actually find a job and find employment and a decent income. Yeah. So there's that. So I mean, when you're asking more generally about people taking some time off from employment and work, yeah, that's not really. I don't really have much to say about that because what I've been looking at is really like long-term unemployment, people who are for different reasons, such as health problems or drug abuse problems or immigrants coming to Sweden who have been struggling in different ways to maintain some employment and maintain a footing in the labor market, haven't managed to do so. So it's really a group of people I've been looking at which are like far away from the labor market. You can say that sometimes we talk about like marginalized unemployed people or people at a remote distance from the labor market who have high thresholds. They need a lot of support to get into or to be able to maintain a job. And I think also my research interest is more a question of like marginalized populations, vulnerable groups, and not people who might be unemployed out of choice, but more the people are unemployed in spite of a lot of efforts to find employment, in spite of strong desires and motivation and efforts to actually to work and be part of the labor market, be part of society, and also have a decent standard of living.
Yeah, now that's what I said, that maybe this question is a little out of out of scope because you have not done this research in your thesis. But this was just yeah, when I was thinking about that, how the concept of unemployment may be seen in a very different ways. You talked about the marginalized people or where the employment is a need and they have to do it. And on the other hand, there are the people who choose it for a certain time period. But of course, they get money from the insurance agencies. And then there are the people, for example, when we talk about the immigrants and migrants who are coming from very different cultures here, they need employment, but sometimes the employment they got the employment being offered to them, sometimes it create a conflict with their cultural styles of living styles. And then they have some problems with the job placement agencies. For example, I know that in some of the cultures, they have a certain gender roles in the family. And sometimes if the woman is being offered some job for 8 hours, they think that it would be problematic for the child care in the home because it is considered as a primarily a woman job. So in that case, the unemployment takes a different turn. So I know this is just, I mean, just supplementary questions that you have discussed anything about these cultural things related to unemployment in your thesis?
Not really. I think those are tricky questions because I mean, in Sweden now we have a rather, a far-right government which tends to spread very negative views about immigrants, people coming to Sweden. And commonly, the culture of immigrants, culture is a very unclear word in this context, but they often like demonize and problematize the culture of immigrants and saying that that immigrants might not have the work ethics as native Swedes would. So I don't really know. I think it's difficult to talk about because there's a wider discussion which is very racist and xenophobic about this. And I would also say, I mean, the issue you mentioned about gender roles, that is also part and package of the native Swedish culture, if there is such a culture, if we can speak of culture in that way. So there tends to be an exaggeration that says that native Swedes would be would not have those issues, and all women in Sweden, the idea is that all women are active in the labor market, and that there would not be any ideas that women should be at home caring for kids and concerned with domestic work and all that. So yeah, I think it's tricky.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, the native Nordic culture, it also has some certain type of gender division of work. Well, I mean, as you said, that culture itself is a quite complex thing that we can discuss. Okay, it was very interesting to talk about recognition of poor people and unemployed people in your research. And just to conclude this discussion on the recognition of unemployed or poor people, how do you see that? Do you think that the agencies or employment agency or other agencies who are offering the jobs to the unemployed people, they consider the perspective or the voices of these people in their policies and implementation? Do you think that?
That's a very good point, and that's one of the issues in my work, my research as well, and an issue in the broader research around this topic. I mean, in many ways, welfare recipients will share different experiences of this. Some welfare recipients will say that they feel that the social workers, as we call them in these agencies, are sort of interested in the perspectives and the preferences and listen and also adapt the services to the actual perspectives and needs of the welfare recipients. But then there are also welfare recipients who don't feel that they are listened to and taken seriously and respected. And I think especially long-term unemployed people who have been struggling with employment for a long time and who are, I mean, very, very far down on the social ladder in terms of the income level or education level and those things. I mean, I think also that generally because there are these public attitudes of poor people which are very negative, I think also that seeps into these agencies, and that poor people are treated in a way which, say, middle class or high income earners would not be treated as disrespectfully. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I can see that giving voices to the people to whom we concern about, it's also a very important aspect in any policy or any intervention. How do you want to take this study afterwards? I mean, you want to research more on it, or what is your planning about it?
It's a good question. I don't really know, to be completely honest. There are some different, routes I could take. There's some different ways I could continue my research in this field of labor market policies and welfare benefits after this study. We'll see. I mean, I could do some more work with the concept of recognition, for instance. There has not been too much work done on that and how that concept can be useful in understanding the social issues in these labor market policies. But there also needs to be done more research in terms of the actual practices of the actual level of service delivery in activation or labor market policies. What actually goes down? What happens in these interactions between social worker, service provider, and service recipient, welfare recipient? What are the dialogues? What are the services? What is the training like? And like what you said, how do welfare recipients experience these services? Do they feel that they are taken seriously? Do they feel they are neglected? So there are different avenues. So I'll see which way I go in.
Yeah, so great. It means that there is something that you want to explore about it, but you have not yet planned about it.
Yes, I haven't decided yet which direction to go, and I've been applying for some funding, research funding. So we'll see what materializes. Yeah. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of issues to explore in this field, for sure.
Good. And you think that the findings from this research, it can be helpful for the social work students, I mean, not students, but social workers or the people who are engaged with social work?
Yes, certainly, for sure. There's a lot of discussions in this thesis about the interactions, like I said, service delivery, and also there's a heavy emphasis in this thesis on the experiences of welfare recipients. How are the social workers experienced, and what is appreciated with the social workers and what is less appreciated? And also the thesis is also written in English, and I'm also engaging in a discussion with a broader international research area around these policies, activation, active labor market policies, or labor market policies and activation. So there's also, yeah, I hope also that this thesis can also can be related to discussions about these similar policies in other countries.
Great. Well, my best wishes are with you, and I hope that you will continue working on this type of critical topics that are particularly relevant to social work practice. Thank you very much, Lagunathan.
Thank you very much. It's
It was
lovely.
very nice to talking to you.
Same. Thank you.
Thank you.